Well, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of 4x3. Today's guests were joined by Hawka, but before we get too much into it, I do actually want to take some time to explain the whole premise of this show a little bit more and explain more so the title of this show here, 4x3. If you haven't got the idea behind it, is 4 guests, of course, and then 3 topics to debate on. So that's kind of the idea there. If you guys didn't really understand the title last time around, but yeah, man, Hawka, I'm really excited to be joined here with you today. Of course, our co-stars there in Paladin and Yokai. But Hawka, how have you been? You're fresh off of Gamers 8. Looking forward to seeing you on more stuff as well.
Yeah, I'm doing well. I was convinced you were going to start the episode by explaining the clothing choices and then go into the format. That's what I thought was going to happen. But no, I feel like it's almost better if we don't give context, you know?
Yeah. Keep it a secret. I'll never understand why. Perfect.
I feel underdressed today, man.
Yeah, you didn't get the memo. Apparently, it was left out of the Discord group chat. Man, messed up. But yeah, we can go ahead and hop into our first statement, and this one's going to be brought to you by yours truly, Neokai. Obviously coming through with the first one. So go ahead and walk us through this one.
Yeah. So,
this
was Annie's.
Annie's. Okay, go ahead and walk us through it.
Yeah, I might as well introduce it. I think a huge conversation topic right now is just the fact that nobody really knows who the #1 team in the world is right now. I decided to pick a name that is in the conversation, but not necessarily the de facto answer. So I'm just gonna put the statement out there: is G2 the #1 team in the world? Whether you guys strongly agree or disagree, it's up to you guys. I personally will be putting it in the mid disagree portion of the spectrum. Honestly, I think that they're definitely in the conversation, but I don't think that they are. I more am leaning more towards an Ence or Vitality. I feel like they have a little bit more structure to them. I think they have a little bit more longevity, consistency about them in comparison to G2, which I feel like is a team that has a lot of individual holes. Or sorry, their individuals cover up a lot of their holes in their kind of foundation. At least that's where I'm at.
Okay, Haka, you can go ahead and go next as well.
Okay, I think so. G2 is the #1 team in the world. Ooh, I think I would maybe go slightly towards the agree side, actually. Just a little, just nudge me a little over there. I don't want to be crazy on this one, but I think as much as when I watch them play, I don't think their structure is as good as some of the top teams. I think, like, especially as analysts, sometimes we get a bit too caught up on a team's structure and outplaying each other tactically. But this team's firepower is just so crazy that they are going to win tournaments a lot of the time. And so even if I don't think they're like the most structured team, I would say Vitality and Ents beat them in that aspect. I think they probably are the best team because I would pick them against any other team right now to have the likelihood of winning, honestly. So slightly agree, but I think no one's going to be super strong on this, I assume, unless someone wants to go crazy.
I guess I'm going to take over
Okay,
next.
go ahead.
Yeah. So I think for me, I'm probably going to lean more over towards strongly disagree, right? A little bit further than Annie, but not as deep down there. But more along the lines of, because I think while obviously Cologne, very good result, I think inconsistencies for me can't net a #1 team. I think individuals, they probably have the best showing of firepower, as you mentioned, Hawker. But I think at the same time, there's a lot that they lack, as we've seen. And if I was going to then make a decision off the dome, #1 team, I'd still lean in favor of Vitality. They'd still be my go-to team regardless at the moment. I still think right now they're playing very, very good Counter-Strike. Obviously, we've seen at the moment with Gamers 8, they're looking pretty strong. Who knows what will be the result of the finals, but they're still looking like a very good team to me. I think I'd probably either go Vitality, or I'd maybe even still be tempted with the likes of an Ents. Obviously, we've seen 20 finals they've been in a row now, right? For me, that just looks really good. Even if they're not winning out the finals all the time, the fact that they're still in that top 2 conversation of nearly every tournament that they're in also puts Ents, for me, in my eyes, put them a little bit higher than G2. G2's one-off win of Cologne. Not saying, that's all they're going to find, but I'd rather have consistency of every single final, or pretty much all the finals of Ents, rather than just a one win of G2. That's what I'd lean.
The other thing that I could bring up here is the map pool. I don't necessarily feel like I'm very comfortable across the board for G2, and I do think there's definitely some maps where the ideas are very much like, okay, we're gonna take some aim duels and we're gonna get in your face, and if those opening aim duel attempts work out, which when you have Nico on your team and m0nesy on your team, it does make things a lot easier. But that being said, it can fall flat on its face if their game plans to kind of counteract that. And we saw how Ence fought against G2's Ancient, how Anubis for G2 looked a little bit lackluster at Cologne. I think they turned it around against Vitality at Gamers 8. But I think that so a couple of the maps in their pool just feel very contact heavy. It doesn't feel like they really have too much of a game plan, which is fine. I think it's fine to have a loose playstyle, but I just do tend to just lean a little bit more to some of the playstyles of the likes of Ence and Vitality, where you do just have cut roles for every single player, and it feels like everybody understands how to play to a T. And the mid rounds have just been getting so much better for Snappy and for Apex respectively, that I feel like even strategically they feel just much more comfortable. Very similar to just each other, but I think that they both have much more consistency than G2.
Yeah.
You know what I love? I love that we haven't even mentioned Heroic at all, even though technically they're number 1 ranked on HLTV.
That's a
I
good
don't know.
point.
I feel like they've really taken a dip. I think now we start to see them right. I mean, obviously there was kind of the meme of the semi-final curse kind of thing, and now it kind of looks a little bit more than a meme itself. I feel like when it comes to the bigger stage, at those final steps, they seem to start to falter. Some of the bigger names don't step up. There's obviously been a lot of holes in Cadian's game style as well, where I think Snappy for me right now is calling a game tenfold of what Cadian's calling. So that's why I still lean in favor of Ence, or even in favor of Vitality in the same regard. I know ranking wise, obviously Heroic are number 1 right now, but I don't know. But in my eyes, I feel like that's the last few, a while ago bringing it up rather than currently kind of thing.
I
I
think
think
if
I think
Ence
there's
was at DC, they would probably be up there as well, to be honest with you. That
yeah.
would
I
have been
mean
a
that's
complete
the
game
huge
changer.
issue.
We don't get to see Ence obviously at some of those blast events, which I think is why we don't see them come through and be higher in the ranking. Obviously, like Heroic have come through and won a lot of those events as well, so that kind of artificially boosts them. And like you said, I think Cadian coming through, the big reason why we don't really talk about them as a number 1 team is because I don't think really Cadian brings it on the op either. His positioning kind of is way down there in kind of the lower tier compared to other oppers who are way more mobile. Maybe it's because he's calling or something, but I feel like it's tough to be like right now, especially a top team without a top opper. I mean, you see some Pius's impact, you see ZywOo's impact, how they're all over the map at all times, and that's cost them a lot when it comes to series. So I think, yeah, I just want to mention a little bit on G2. I'm just gonna throw myself in the slightly agree, just because I feel like there's not a lot of cases where we can talk about it. Maybe the Vitalities of the world, maybe the Ences of the world, but we need to see Ence win a little bit more events before we talk about them being number 1. Whereas they were able to close out Dallas. They made the finals of Cologne, but obviously didn't close it out. So I think that they have, like Hawka said, maybe a little bit rougher support structures, but some of the best like firepower pieces. They got so much names on that roster. So if they could actually nail down a little bit of their structure, which is something I hope they work on in the future, they really could do some good work.
I will also say like G8 right now, I really don't think G2 were like super pumped up for this event. Is the vibe I
Not at
got.
all.
Like they
Yeah.
kind of half-assed it a little bit, which is wild because it's $1 million prize
Yeah.
pool. I don't know why they're half-assing it, but whatever. They could do that. But if you look at the big events, in the big moments, I still just have so much more faith in Nico than ZywOo, genuinely. And I know
That's
everyone
true.
in the past, Nico
True.
a choker. I don't think so. I think Nico comes through such a self-sufficient player. That's the main thing about Nico. Whereas ZywOo, you don't always get that from him in the big moments. And you also just have, I think the key for G2 is always Hunter for me. Because I do think that HooXi is much more kind of letting the players have freedom in a sense, is the vibe you get from him IGLing. But Hunter is someone who clearly is really smart in the way he plays. He'll get into a lot of either lurky or even sometimes advanced lurk positions. And then if he's playing well, I feel like he can really help bring a little bit more like tactical prowess to the team. Actually, I really think he's probably a very strong voice on this squad, and now he's been playing way better recently. I think that's why they look a lot better in some moments, because he can get into those positions, and he clearly has a really good understanding of the game. You can see that when he plays. He knows rotations. He knows everything that's going on.
Yeah, he had a huge amount of clutches in the Cologne final as well that just completely turned the tides. And I do actually agree with those points. I think Ents also have a setback in the fact that they haven't played as many grand finals or S tier grand finals. And you could tell that the way that they were playing some of those series, it took a long time for them to warm in. A lot of their game plans just completely fell apart. Players that were usually absolute rocks, i.e., like Diha and Madden, their kind of game plans just kind of fell apart. They didn't look like shells of their former selves. And I think that if you give them enough time, sure, I think they could definitely rise up to that occasion. But yeah, I think for right now, if you had to take
Do
a
you,
team that is the ideal big game team, it is G2 just across the board.
do you think that the reason they looked like shells was because of the fact that they were in a grand final, or because they were playing G2 though? That's the question.
Yeah. I think it's just fear. I mean, because you think about the Dallas Grand Final, they're playing against a Mouse roster that I think everybody, for lack of a better term, knew that they were going to just fall
Yeah,
apart
right.
after that tournament anyways. And they won essentially the tournament by beating FaZe in that semi. And then after that, I just feel like they had already dispatched of everybody important in the Cologne bracket, that it was just like, oh, this is our first big grand final. We're playing in, the Cathedral. We're playing against G2. We're playing against Nico, and we're playing against Hunter, m0nesy. These guys are all on fire. Race for an MVP on that squad alone. Like all of those compounding factors, I feel like this team just gets just worried, and you could tell that. Like I think every little bit of that team went down 5%, and that extra
Yeah.
5% is probably what they needed.
On the other
Yeah.
side, though, would you not say it would be the same thought process if it was Vitality in that final instead of G2? Do you not think that Ents would have the same kind of thing? Like, oh shit, we're against arguably the best player in the world at the moment. Arguments, of course, there with Nico in the sense, but ZywOo, right, who's obviously playing good. Obviously, I know that bracket-wise, it couldn't have been the same, but let's just say, for the benefit of the doubt here, that's the conversation. If it was Vitality on the other side, right, and it was Vitality in that final, do you not think Ents would have had the same reaction in the sense that, oh, we got, a Vitality or a ZywOo that's playing the way he is right now, Spinks, who's doing what he's doing at the moment, playing however well he's playing. And of course, you kind of even seen with the introduction of Flames how well he slotted into that team, that they'd also be scared. There's a lot of firepower in Vitality too. So do you not think it would be the same like level of fear in a sense?
The way I'll respond to that is that ZywOo in big playoff matches falls
Very
off a
true.
cliff, right?
Very true.
And
Very
that's
true.
and that's the one thing that I'm sure Snappy is aware of.
Mhm.
And you can see how they play against Vitality. Well, they played against them in the semis. They were a team possessed. Sun Pius had an unreasonably good series, and I think that head to head felt so favored in Sun Pius's favor for many of the series that they've played, that I think stylistically and mentally they've always had an edge against Vitality, that I don't think that they have unlocked that against G2 yet. And I think once they turn that corner, I think that there is no direct counter to Ence right now. For right now, I think.
I'm really interested in that matchup going forwards, because I wonder whether it is just a case of, so they also played at Pro League back in like March, and
Yeah.
Ents did win there, but that was when G2 weren't like as good. I don't think their players were in as good form. And when you look at Ents, especially the riflers, you look at them and you think like they're nowhere near the G2 riflers. They're not even close.
Yeah,
Like,
for sure.
and that's why I wonder if the matchup does maybe suck for them, because we think G2 kind of just rely on firepower. Maybe that's a bad matchup for Ents, because I don't know if Ents' firepower can actually match up, even in like a group stage game. I'd be so interested to see that in a group stage.
I think a lot of people are saying that, right? Ents don't have the firepower. They don't have the pieces. I think a lot of people forget that like Diha is very incredible in the positions that he plays, and is very cerebral when it comes to his rifling. Like outside on Nuke, I feel like he plays it so smart. You have an incredible rifler there. You've got obviously NertZ who can just like play such a like passive lurk style, but can also like get some aggressive maneuvers in there as well. So Like you said, it doesn't match up necessarily one for one, but I do feel like people are still underrating because of the consistency that we see out of Ence. Is like they have leveled up, and a lot of people credit that to Snappy and what he can do. But like the firepower to these riflers is it can't be like understated right now, because they've been leveling up alongside like Snappy's calls so far in the second part of this year, which I think is good. They have a lot to like work for. They're not coming into a Gamers 8 and saying, guys, we can take a back seat, which is obviously really exciting, but. Yeah, I think the riflers on this team get underrated quite a bit.
They're way more multi-dimensional than I feel like their original Spinks roster looked like. Like Madden has so many more aggressive sequences that are working much more effectively. Deha, of course, is putting in work. Still that rock for the roster, but NertZ, man, I think NertZ in comparison to in comparison to Spinks, I just feel like he has so much more flexibility in his game, and it's allowing for Snappy to make some really good mid-rounding calls. It makes his life a lot easier when NertZ can, find a backstab here or there, find a really good timing elsewhere on the map. He's just so aware about that, and I think it's completely changed how Ence looks as a roster altogether, where they are not just out of spawn calling as Snappy usually did previously. It definitely is in their game plan, but it's not the end all be all at this point. And the fact that they have mid to late rounds that they could rely on now, due to players like NertZ and players like Sunpius, I think their gameplay just looks so much more interesting now.
Yeah, they got some of the best like clutch players, and like 2v4s, you can almost take Ents more often than not when they're in those sort of situations. And like NertZ and Sunpius are alive. Like that duo is unbelievable.
I do think NertZ is still like a little inconsistent for my liking.
For sure.
I think his vitality on the nuke game. I'm pretty sure he was on single digit kills for like ages, and they lost that 16-14, which is a shame. But I agree. Like I think he's in the positions where he needs to be their best rifler, and he shows that he's capable of that. It's just not all the time right now, and that's why. I mean, you look at the other side, and you've got like Nico, and it's just crazy. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know where we land on this.
A sub 1 rating in what was like 4 years. I think I saw like a thing on HTV. It's like he's not at a sub 1 rating. I don't know whether it was
NertZ?
matches or events. No, Nico.
Oh, okay.
So you obviously like that when you talk about like inconsistency, it's just not something that really plagues Nico basically ever. No, I think it was like per event. He's never had a sub 1 rating in the last like 4 years. So kind of nuts. So Annie, would you not then be a little bit more towards the agree side?
I can definitely be convinced. I can be convinced because there are conditions that work against Ents in a lot of situations. That you're right. I think that they need more events. They need more time. They're in a really good position right now. I could see them winning Pro League. I could see them, winning the next couple of S tier events down the horizon. But yeah, for right now, like as of right now, you can definitely say that G2 is potentially a better bet purely off the basis of the matchup and just the pedigree of the players, I guess.
And same for like better bet versus vitality as well in your eyes, or better bet versus heroic as well in the same vein. Because obviously we're talking about G2, the number 1 team in the world, not just Ents in this conversation, right? So that's where I lean, because
the vitality one's hard for me.
I would broadly say I bank on vitality to have a better performance than G2, despite G2 in my eyes having better players. I think G2 are a better individual team every day of the week. I think they're the best individual team in the world. I think Nico's the best rifler of all time. We already know this. I don't think this is really a debate anymore. I think M0nesy is basically going to be the GOAT in CS2. I think we've kind of already had that conversation. However, it doesn't mean that translates to them winning or performing consistency. And that's where I'd maybe look towards a vitality in my eyes as the team who, at the moment, I would bank on them performing. If you had to go towards Pro League, I would look towards Pro League and say vitality will do better than G2. That's where I'd lean right now, just because I feel like it's a safer call than G2. Not saying that vitality are a better team, but a safer call. That's where I'm leaning.
I feel like very like this whole situation is very rock paper scissors, like where Ents probably beats Vitality, Vitality beats G2, and G2 beats Ents. Because I think stylistically they all have their strengths and weaknesses, but I do think that in specific situations, Vitality always finds a way to clutch up against G2. Ents always finds a way to like level up their players against Vitality. And for some reason, G2's individuals just outshine the tactics of Ents every single time. So I think it is a case-by-case basis, the more that I think about it. But yeah, that's why I made this statement.
So that's why I'm towards strongly disagree, just because of that one point. Because I've had this conversation before, and I couldn't convince myself the other way. So that's why I'm a little bit to the left.
I think so. I think G2 can beat Vitality though. Is the thing. I think
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
it is
it's
definitely
Yeah.
much closer than the other on the other
that
matchup. For
that's
sure.
where I think it goes for me. And also, I agree with you. I think it's a scenario where if you wanted me to pick a team that I was pretty certain would, like be top 4 in an event, I'd probably say Vitality or maybe even Ence might be better shouts than G2 just for consistency.
Yeah.
But if I'm picking a team to win the event with the highest percentage chance, especially the biggest events, I still think I would go G2 just because
Okay.
they do seem to have the ability to have just such good individuals that no one can handle. So
Well, be
I think it
honest with
really
me.
depends on what you judge for #1 team.
Going into Cologne, did you
Yeah.
have the thought process, the pre-playoffs, even okay, you can go, yeah, like pre-playoffs, pre-group stage, anything? Did you go in and be like, oh, G2 winning this? Because I know
No, well,
personally, I went
I
in and
said
said
Cloud9
Vitality.
because I'm a crazy man.
Okay, no, I respect that. I respect that. I respect
Oh,
it.
I
I love a bit of
respect it.
Cloud9. But
But no,
that's what
I
I
am
mean,
with you.
right?
I am with you.
No one will go into an event unless you're Kassad and Yanko, who obviously, have their biases, but granted, very warranted, right? But we'll go into most events and say GT are guaranteed to win this. The same way people were very confident about saying that with Vitality, despite them obviously not doing it. You'd have more people in my eyes who'd be like, I reckon Vitality can win this event more than G2, just because of you're kind of scared about them fucking up,
If you're talking
I do
about
get
like
you.
one team that can win an event, I don't think a lot of people say G2. If you're talking about putting like a tier list of like, oh, these are rosters that will win events, I think you could put them in there. But I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
I think the thing that I'm going with really is that I think we kind of underestimate them because I think a lot of people when we're watching the game, especially as analysts, we just love teams that can outposition, outmaneuver, and tactic each other. Whereas, like,
Sure.
if my only point is just saying over and over again their firepower's sick, it's like I can only make that point so many ways, so it doesn't make for a great, a great discussion. But I
It's
think that aspect is so much greater than we maybe give it credit for
Yeah.
sometimes. I
They-
really
At,
do.
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I mean, if you kill all 5 of your opponents, you win the round. So
yeah,
you know,
they get
I couldn't have said it
outpositioned
better,
so
man.
much too. So like the fact that they even win events is
Get this
wild
man
to
on the
me.
desk.
It's
Go down.
But what if you kill them all after time? Then you might
Well-
not win the round, actually. So
Well, here we go.
Ooh, that's take them right back
That-
off.
That's point number 2, Andrew.
And on to our next topic here. We have my topic, which after the Gamers 8 tournament, I felt like it would be fitting to talk a little bit more about, what formats and things look like, which was single elimination events are good for the CS circuit. I'll go ahead and start off with my point, and it's kind of dependent on a couple of different factors, especially coming from NA. I want to be like pretty generous to people that have to travel. I think it can be a good thing depending on location. If it's somewhere in like Europe, I feel like it's ideal or more ideal that it's single elimination. I think that can offer up like an interesting change in the way like tournaments are run out. But I kind of like the idea of single elimination being a part of the circuit in some fashion. So not the biggest fan when you have to travel all the way to Saudi Arabia, I believe. For this event, but when it's in somewhere in a nice location, I think it can have its uses.
I really like it. I think I'm going to go all the way to strongly agree. I
Ooh.
think that there's definitely a place for it in this space just because we have so many different formats that a lot of people complain about. There's, the triple bracket in Pro League that's coming up that I know a lot of people don't really enjoy. You have the Swiss stage that people complain about. You have, I mean, sometimes people even complain about GSL and just regular double elim brackets just because of the seeding. But I think with single elim, it kind of puts a lot of those issues to rest. And it's like, look, if you win, you stay. If you lose, you go home. And a lot of the times, there's certain rosters that probably don't need to be playing 2 best of 3s. I know it's not healthy for the scene, but I'm going to basically be really selfish here and say that, like, I'd like to see top tier Counter-Strike as much as possible. I would like to see just really competitive top 8s as much as possible. And for right now, I mean, this top 4 that we had at this event was really exciting. I think both the semifinals really delivered 2 really close series against the 4 best rosters that I'd like to see play again and again. At least that's how I just perceive the top level end of CS. So I don't know if it's necessarily it should be the de facto format. I definitely think that they could get very boring very quickly, but I do think that if you have at least one of these a year, 2 of these a year, it could be a really nice breath of fresh air to kind of stave us between big tournaments and make things a lot more exciting, I guess, just out the gates.
Take it away.
All right, yeah, I'd go. I think I'd go strongly agree as well. Put me maybe slightly left of Paladin. Yeah, like there. That seems about right. I really enjoyed commentating the first day. Honestly, I felt like the top teams didn't take the early games as like warm-up games, which they do sometimes. I actually thought they brought a lot of intensity, and you saw a lot of really classy performances from like G2 maybe were the ones that struggled a bit, but like Vitality came in against, I mean, it's against MIBR, sure, but they looked really good. Like they looked actually very good right from the start. And I obviously don't want this at any big event or like any of the top events throughout the year. But yeah, I think if you had like two or three of these events a year, and there is like a little bit of space in the calendar. I know people talk about that there's struggles, but every now and then you have a week where there's maybe not like a huge event on. Yeah, get one of these events in. I think it also does just make it like more fun for the viewer, honestly, because like you're saying, Pro League, you almost don't care that much about some of the early games. It's like cool, but you're not as invested as a fan. And I think that's the thing we should really care the most about. And this event, I think it's really nice to have a switch up occasionally. And like you're saying, really, there weren't that many upsets. I think the only upset in the opening round you could argue about was VP over FaZe. But I just think that VP, just a weird ass team who just, only show up to one event every 6 months and then seem to be incredible still and cause an upset. So I don't think that's down to the format really at all. So yeah, I actually really like it. I think it worked out way better than I was expecting.
Okay, I'm gonna.
Here we go.
I'm gonna let you place me depending on what I say.
Okay,
I
fair
think,
enough.
right? I want to start with it depends, right? I think first of all, I think I strongly agree if it's online. I don't agree, however, if it's on LAN. I don't think there is any way any other TO in the world, barring Gamers 8, makes like even remotely near, like can essentially afford this. There's no way you can make money like this. So it's not, I think for the health of the scene, there's no way that TOs could organize events like this with top teams in, arenas like Gamers 8, for example, or anything of the sort, and do a 4-day event and then ship them up. There's just no way, no other TO could just like reasonably put that kind of money into an event, which is no way makes any sort of profit in that way. So for me, I think for the health of the scene, I don't think it's the best thing. I think if it was online, it's fine, obviously, because it's online, right? It's a different scenario. Obviously, way less stakes. I think doing this on LAN, however, the only TO in my eyes that could do it is ESL/Gamers 8, Savvy, and anyone under Savvy, for example, which then of course says that maybe ESL could do one if they wanted to, but I don't know when they would do it or what they would do. They've already got an incredibly busy circuit as it goes, and they all kind of link together in essence already, right? So I don't think any other openings to add it into the ESL circuit, so after a one-off event. But yeah, I think for me, yeah, and it's kind of something you were talking about, Cole, right? We're flying like a team from America, for example, coming over, or Brazil, which is like a 12-hour flight or whatever, only to go out, you got 2-3 hours of a game and then you're back home again. So I think it's super exciting. The stakes are really good. I think the tournament was incredibly fun to watch. Personally, I've always been one of those people who thinks Pro League can get a little bit long. It's much better now because the in-between game segments are really, really good on Pro League. I think they're very fun to watch, but they used to be very boring. And I used to basically just not watch until it was playoffs. So I think for how short the tournament is, it's very good. It's very exciting. The stakes are high from the get-go, and no warm-ups, as you said, Hawka. But I think there's no way any other TO bar Gamers 8/ESL Savvy essentially could run this, because it's got to be the biggest net loss ever in terms of money, right?
Why do you think it loses so much money compared to an event that would be like twice the length with group stages and things like that?
Because I feel like when you've got those events, there's a lot more that goes around in terms of it feels like the way the money spent is spread across a longer few days. The only thing that really ups in terms of those days for me is small things, I say in quotation marks, like obviously paying for hotels and keeping the players there and fed and whatnot, right? But I feel like for this, like it's such a big investment flying people in for 4 days to ship them back out again. I just feel like you don't get the consistent longevity of eyes on the product to then warrant big amounts of money coming in from sponsors. Obviously, they have some pretty decent sponsors. They have like Razer and like KFC, I think is another one they have. They have quite a few, right? But because it's 4 days. Normally, when you look at these things, it's you say like, okay, for example, Pro League, right? It's 5 weeks. We're 5 weeks averaging, per day we get X amount of, a million different eyes on the product. Therefore, you can pay us this amount, whatever. But it's because it's 4 days. In my eyes, I don't know exactly how the money would work, but it feels like it's an incredibly high investment for a very small product. You know what I mean? That's where it feels in my eyes.
I'll give another example. It's not a single elim, but it's lesser teams, but there was a tournament in Mykonos, Greece in like 2017, and
The
it was
party
like
one?
yeah, it was like 8 teams, and it was just they bought out a house and they played in that. It was not a house, like more like a resort-ish type thing.
Yeah.
And they played like they played for over like a couple days. I think it was like a
Yeah.
weekend tournament.
It was
Room in a
Gamers Paradise,
calendar
wasn't it
as well.
called?
You don't have a lot of room in a calendar, so that's good for that as well.
It was called
Yeah,
Gamers Paradise, I'm pretty sure.
It was ESG Mykonos.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. A different
yeah.
one.
Did
and
Gamers
yeah.
Paradise happen? I don't want to get you off topic.
That was the one that like was like a complete shit show that like
Yeah.
Scream and stuff went to, and it was like a colossal
Yeah,
failure. Basically.
yeah, it wasn't
Not that
It,
one.
it was the one
Yeah.
with Mouse and VP, and I think Mouse ended up winning that tournament. But it was like a very entertaining tournament because of how quick it was. It seemed pretty cost efficient. Obviously, I think I heard that some of the players didn't get paid out for a while, but that's besides the point. That happens. It's esports. But the tournament itself was really well run in terms of like the games themselves. But yeah, the broadcast was a little rough, but the location was good. The schedule was swift. The format was good, and it looked like it was relatively like an easier event to run because you're just in one stationary place. You're not really like going out of your way to make an arena or anything. You just have a very simple studio. You're using makeshift rooms already, and I think that you could easily fit something like that in the calendar. I mean, CS Summit was a similar idea as well. I think you could avoid doing the arena aspect of it. That doesn't really matter to me. I think the whole point is just sticking to the format and having the biggest teams there. I think you could bring the cost down dramatically and still have it on LAN while still retaining the feel of this tournament as a whole, I think.
The other thing that worries me, that like, which is what I like about kind of the longer tournaments, is when you get to build the storylines throughout the tournament. Like, for example, like I look at Ence and Dallas, for example, right? That was like a long storyline that came through about how they, really found form. But you don't really have these here. We've got Ence and Vitality have come through in, it's a 4-day tournament, right? Gamers Day, it's only 4 days or 5 days. It's a very, very small tournament. So you don't really get the storylines. I think that's what I'm saying. I think it's a good thing overall. The only caveat is I think I still feel like this is a very expensive tournament that very few TOs could run. Or if they were to run it, it would be without a Hail Mary of tech issues. Like you said, like this Greece one was not the smoothest run. Obviously, it did go in the end to plan, but you know what I mean, right? That's what it comes down to for me. I feel like very few TOs could run this, so I feel like it is a good thing. I think it's very fresh for the calendar. I've really enjoyed watching Gamers A. I basically watch every single day, so I've really enjoyed it. However, I just think I'm worried about how sustainable it is in terms of investment in versus money made back. That's where I stand.
I get you.
Most-
I think
Go ahead.
there's like an interesting aspect to me of like, I wonder if there's a way you could market this that makes it seem way cooler for like casual fans, where they're like, yeah, this is the most cutthroat tournament on the calendar, single elimination.
Showdown
You
tries
just
to
set
do
up the
that, I've
bracket and
noticed.
just
The Blast
Yeah,
Showdown.
yeah, I would love it if they just like just almost literally set up the bracket to have teams that kind of have beef against each other. Like try and lean into that aspect or do something a little different, because like realistically, at the end of the year, we're not going to look back on Gamers 8 and say that was a landmark tournament for Ence or Vitality, and that's why they're the top team. Like we're not really looking at it like that. We're mainly looking at the
True.
big four events. So
Okay, I've got
I
another
think you
point.
could have a bit of fun and like bring casual fans in. I think that could be a really interesting thing. I'd love the experimenting.
I've got another what if that would turn away casual fans, right? And this is
Okay.
obviously the risk of single elim tournaments, right? We always talk about like these things being prone to upsets. Granted, games has been very good for not having that, but what happens if we did have upsets? What happens if we had a final of Falcons versus Virtus Pro? Am I watching? No, fuck no, no chance. I'm watching CCT, brother. It's the same level.
Come on.
Or let's say we had an MIBR Falcons, opposite side of the bracket. MIBR Falcons as a grand final. Am I there? No, thank you. I am playing anything.
What about the
else rather
Blast
than watching that game.
playoffs, though? I mean, let's be real. There's been upsets all over.
If you're a
That's what I'm
hardcore
saying.
viewer and you're telling me that MABR has beaten like Navi, Vitality, G2, and
course.
all the way to
Yeah,
get
yeah,
there, that is insane. That's like
No, but
that is like breaking like HLTV if
yes,
that
yeah,
happens.
we're talking about casual fans here. I'm giving the caveat of casual fans, not us. I would fucking think that was really fun. Like that's like how the fuck has this happened? How the fuck have MIBR come through with playing with kind of Drop and Sapphire after they've just been dropped, right? I now come through to a final. For us, for everyone here as hardcore CS people, that is like an incredible storyline. But if I'm trying to convince my casual mates, oh, do you want to sit in Discord and watch this game? They're like, no. Like, why the fuck would I want to watch MIBR? Do you know what I mean? So for a casual fan, there's the risk the other way where we get, you know, quarters or semis that are incredibly boring with two teams that have upset come through, or two smaller organizations who like for example, I was in a conversation with a friend of mine who's been to he went to, you know, Fatal Under Major, he went to Stockholm 2021. He didn't know who 9 were. He has no idea because he hasn't watched
Yeah.
the last, like, he hasn't watched this year essentially. So he has no idea who 9 were. And I had to explain that they're a Polish team, and before that, the only Polish team he knew was VP, the old VP. So this is what I'm talking about. It's like for them, like if we had a world in which a semi-final of potentially could have been 9 MIBR, right? Trying to build the hype of him to that game is nigh on impossible to a casual fan. To us, we understand the storyline behind it, which is a big part of why we enjoy Counter-Strike, because we know the lore and the history. To a casual fan, the other way, there's a risk where you could have, massive, upsets come through, or like, to put it frank, quite boring teams come through. You could have had like a Fnatic Falcon semi-final.
Yeah, like a lower viewership teams.
Yeah, no one really gives a fuck about either of those two teams coming through, or like, like Apex playing off against God knows, you know what I mean, right? So like that's what I'm talking about. Like that's where I think you could lose a lot of casual fans if you get a really unfortunate single elim and you get some real like kind of mid-ass teams make it through.
We've had that happen though, like in big events already this year, right? That's
The major?
Yeah, right. So like
Yeah.
it's already something that teams are prone. I think that's like credit to some of the tier 2 teams leveling up their game already. But for these, I feel like what Hawka said is that you're not going to, at least ideally, you're not going to see teams just walk into this event. I mean, if you look at like G2 at Blast, obviously fresh off the player break, like teams using some of these events as like boot camps is actually because they have so many chances. I'm down for like second opportunities. I'm down for like double eliminations here or there. Like I think we all agree on that. But like these sort of events, if you're like coming into this and you're an Ence, a team that's hungry and not walking into this one a little bit like maybe lackadaisical, you're gonna see these rosters come through and kick it into gear, even if it's like slow starts in series or in maps. I feel like we've even seen that before. They really quickly are able to like level up their game and realize like if we lose this, we're out basically.
Yeah. If you ask me in 2025 when the circuit's fully open, that's when I'll maybe look at this and be like, okay, like I can get behind it, because we could see teams, real upstart teams who have come through, or maybe if there's a couple more open qualifiers, plus only 2, if I'm right in saying, coming through to Game is 8, or was it just 1? Was it 9?
It
Was
was
that
one
NA one, I think, and a EU one?
And Fnatic and 9 were both.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. So maybe like a couple more, then I could really talk about like kind of cool. Obviously, both of them kind of didn't really do too much for me to even really warrant a conversation. But yeah, I just worry about. Think of the other way. I come back to the finances. Maybe this is kind of the investment banker and me talking. The accountant here. But like if there was a grand final of MIBR Falcons, for example, which is incredibly unlikely, but still is a possibility. There's just no way they're going to get the same level of viewership, which would then warrant the big payouts from sponsors, right? To then justify offsetting this price.
I don't think upsets come as much from single elimination. I actually think when you're at the major, for example, having a Swiss system where you don't know who you're playing, I think that actually is a huge factor in why upsets happen. Whereas, like here, you actually get time to prepare for your opponent. So if you're an underdog team and like G2 don't prep for you, yeah, maybe you might get the upset. But I actually think the top teams get a bit of time and can look and say,
And
okay,
enough
let's
support.
look at this team. Yeah, let's not get completely caught off guard, because a lot of teams will talk about how important anti-stratting and prep work is. I really think the Swiss system actually causes a lot of upsets. And I will also say, like, the aspect I'd really be looking at is like, I look at something like the UFC, like where it feels like an event and it's like super like hardcore cutthroat. You know that there's 2 guys fighting and like it's going down. That's what I'd love to have a CS event like, because I would love an event where I feel like there's a chance it could try and transcend even more. Where you are saying like, oh look, there's like this casual thing on, like let's check it out. Whereas like no one's doing that for Pro League. Pro League's not going to draw in any new viewers ever, realistically,
Yeah.
right? And whereas I just love the idea of having something that maybe could be a bit more widespread, where if you market it in the right way, you try and make it more of a fun single elimination. Let's focus on trash talk. Let's focus on like fun matchups, stuff like that. I think it's like really unexplored, and it could be quite interesting because Counter Strike as a game has a pretty wide amount of people that are aware of it. So
Yeah.
if you market it in the right way, I think you could maybe get other people interested. But it's hard to know and it's hard to do. I just think it's fun to have the idea of switching things up to maybe be able to bring in new viewers. That's why I could see it being good. But we'll see. I don't know.
You
Yeah,
you
I
could
think in
take
that
the
case, go on, Ali,
Go
go
ahead.
on.
Okay, okay. You could take the excitement of the trash talk aspects of Flashpoint, and then you could take the gravitas of something like the E-League Clash for Cash, which is the
Yeah.
rematch
Mhm.
between Astralis and VP, kind of like a heavyweight like title fight type thing. And you could make something really entertaining, and then you could get like the marketability of like CS Summit, where you have like kind of skits or just little themes that you make about specific teams, and you could have them go up against each other. Yeah, there's so many different ways and things that we already have like dipped our toes in across the scene that you could combine with the format of single elim that makes things just completely an entertainment product. You kind of nullify the aspects of what
Right.
the results are, what the teams are, all of that. Like all of the hardcore aspects of it are kind of drawn away. And if you can off the rip just tell your viewers that this is that type of an event, I think people will get more down with that, even more on the hardcore side. And then also you make something a little bit more palatable for the casuals as well, because they're just like, oh, I don't really have to figure out what the double elim situation is. I don't have to know where the bracket flips. I don't have to know about the book hole system. I don't have to know about any of that. I can just sit and watch. If this team wins, they keep going. If they lose, they go home. And that's as simple as that. And I just think as far as casual fans go, it's just the simplest format possible to make their lives a lot easier.
I think, yeah, you basically hit the nail on the head of kind of what I was going to talk about. But I think if you are going to do a single elim and you're going to, I think what would make it really good for casuals is obviously all the things you're talking about. Kind of if you had what current ESL Pro League has with the heavy content skits, which are really, really enjoyable and obviously do incredibly well across like every single social media, stuff like that. Even the Beyond the Summit type vibes, Flashpoint you talked about as well. However, we don't have this at Gamers, right? There obviously is content, but not of to the same caliber. So I think if you were going to do that and with a single elim, you need to partner it with the heavy content, heavy kind of more into the kind of the joke side, and not as much into kind of these. Obviously, it's all well and good having the storylines of these are teams, these are single elim, this is big high stakes, but again, it's not going to draw in too many casual people. So I feel like it would be really good if you had those things as well. So basically, all the things you mentioned, Annie, would be incredible to have those alongside a single elim, and then that tournament is the best of both. You've got the hardcore guys like us who are incredibly looking into the detail about the storylines and the teams and how they're playing under pressure. But then you've got the other side of like casuals being like, us is funny. Like, I've really had, I've been trying to get a friend into Gamers who's actually been watching a lot of it, but the main comment I've had of, oh, look at that chicken running across, or that AR is kind of goofy, right? You know what I mean? So like that's the bulk of it. Someone who's brand new to CS, who's been watching Gamers 8,
That's why.
their two commenters are, like that chicken's kind of funny. Like, look at that thing, and then like, oh, like they're like AI or like AR, augmented reality kind of like faces are kind of goofy, right? Like kind of funny. Like, you know what I mean? That's the bulk of it. So. And that's the most incredible casual kind of person coming from Apex, right? Coming into CS, so it's a completely different vibe. So I think, yeah, if it had the content stuff of like Flashpoint and Pro League and whatever, Beyond the Summer, etc., coming in, plus single elim, amazing tournament. All right, and the third and final point, of course, is mine. Now, this is a broad statement to open up conversations more than opinions, is how I put it, but. The statement is NertZ so far is a better signing than M0nesy, and the reason why I brought this up was I was on a conversation the other day talking about big price tags that we've had in terms of signings coming through. Obviously, the big one recently was talking about Fallen, about 700 grand. It was kind of what his apparently signing was over towards Furia. M0nesy was brought in for 600k from Navi Junior to G2, where there isn't an official number, but the rumors are that NertZ was brought to Ence from Endpoint for somewhere in the region of 60 grand. So, when you look at these big signings and you see NertZ brought on for 60k towards Ence, and we already know that Ence, basically in terms of tier 1, are the best organization in terms of business. They're basically one of the few that make a profit by any means, or at least are public about it, making a profit. You can kind of see why. They're very shrewd in their business. They're very good at making money, but also not spending too much money. And this seems like a pretty good signing. So I want to put that point out there in terms of when I say is a better signing than M0nesy, I'm talking about kind of the price paid to the results you've got. Where would you kind of compare these two if you factor in M0nesy having a 10 times bigger price on his head in comparison to NertZ? So that's what I'm going to throw out there. And I guess Hawka, if you can kickstart us here.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna go slightly towards disagree, just a little. I think that I can see the arguments, I can see the points, and Ents are great with their budget signings, and business wise, it definitely makes a lot of sense. But I'm not gonna lie, I don't care as much about the business side, man. I'm looking for results. I'm looking for big dubs. I'm looking for players that are gonna be great for years. The marketability of M0nesy, Baby Goat, or whatever they're calling him. I don't really love the name, but hey, that's what people are doing, so they're eating it up. So yeah, I think it's just a few aspects from M0nesy that help him out. I mean, they're even apparently using him to promote some weird, dodgy, questionable sponsors I've seen in the past when he just turns 18. So
Might have made their money back.
not going to comment too much on that. But yeah, I just think that even business-wise, there is actually an argument to be made that getting someone like M0nesy for the long term, I mean, we'll see how much CS2 grows the game, okay? I don't know if it's going to be as crazy as everyone thinks, but I can almost see the argument that if you genuinely believe esports is going to be massive, you've just signed a guy that's going to be great for years and years and years, and you could actually stay as like one of the top orgs in the game, and then at that point, you grow so much in value that it doesn't even matter that, you bought him for so much. You made so much in the long run. Just that's how a lot of sports teams make money. They just find someone to sell to, even if they're actually losing money year on year. So yeah, I think I'll actually put me a little bit more towards disagree, actually. Just a little more. I've talked myself into it.
Yeah.
I've sweet talked myself.
I'll go slightly agree, and I'll basically start with the comparison factor of where Ents was with Spinks and then where they've ended up with NertZ. Prior, when they had Spinks, they were dark horses in tournaments, getting the odd final here and there, but not actually capitalizing upon it, and were still being considered as the kind of underdog, not really being considered as a front runner for any of these tournaments, and was pretty much like a guarantee to be a top 4 team, but that's pretty much it. And now with NertZ, now they're actually being a little bit more threatening in terms of how the analysts perceive them, how we perceive them, everything in between. I think people are definitely coming around to the fact that Ents is now much more of a threatening team. And now when I compare that to that of G2, G2 is now bringing in an opper, an actual dedicated opper, compared to their previous roster where they didn't really have a dedicated opper. What it was Amanek, right? That was kind of opping here and there, and that really wasn't cutting it. But the actual move that you're making to bring in M0nesy is to win championships on a regular basis. And to me, I don't know. Well, obviously, I think long term it makes a lot of sense. You're basically spending that 600K for a longer period of time. But for me, in my eyes, when I see G2 as of right now, they've made that move to win as many championships as possible. When you have a core of Nico, Hunter, and JKS, that you should just be winning championships when you slot in M0nesy. And frankly, beyond this slew of tournaments right now, I don't necessarily know if they've backed that up with M0nesy's performances in the forefront. I have a real issue with the inconsistencies that he's bringing to the table as of right now. There's still pretty big ways to go for him to become the elite of the elite right now, and I think that you have to give him a little bit of time to gestate, and he'll get there. I think eventually he will get there, but for right now, I don't know if they've actually hit the threshold of was a successful move yet, in comparison to some other players that are around right now. So for me, in terms of relativity, Ents now becomes much more of a front-running top 3 team or top 2 team, and G2 are pretty much in the same place they were before, if not slightly better.
Yeah, I mean, I'll follow up and I'll actually make a pretty bold stance on this one. At least I feel like it. I'll go pretty firmly and strongly agree. And mine actually doesn't even have to do a lot with like the financial side. That's obviously huge. Like you mentioned, great deal on NertZ. It's kind of like a trademark event. They find these really good pieces. They make really good teams out of them. Mine has to do more so with the fact that NertZ is obviously playing with the rifle. They've got already a strong operance on Pius. I think a lot of people are already talking about that. And so getting a rifler that can kind of jump into a team at like a good rate, first of all, of 60 grand, if that rumor is true, and just like immediately elevate this team to what is a championship caliber team, is fantastic. Now, obviously, when you talk about M0nesy, you have to give him the credit. Joining into this roster, he's got the championships of like big events. He's got the Katowices, the Colognes this year so far. So you've got to mention that. But just looking at the change that NertZ has brought this team, I think before they signed him, their last event with Valde was Kato, and they ended up getting eliminated by Complexity. They turned that around so quickly to a championship in Dallas, grand final appearance, and now back-to-back events here in Cologne and Gamers 8. So I gotta say, man, like long term, we haven't gotten to see like the same fruits of the labor that M0nesy has delivered. But I think over time, NertZ is going to do so much more in terms of impacting this roster. And yeah, maybe M0nesy can have that room to grow, like you said. But I still think out of the gates, like this has been just an incredible year for Ence, and I don't think a lot of teams or people were expecting them to be like a championship caliber team.
So I'll give some context for where this point came up. So a friend of mine, a massive G2 fanboy, obsessed, right? Loves G2, everything about them. And a common goal of mine, Paladin will know this very well, is just to annoy people just by arguing for arguing's sake. And I decided to just go against him and just argue for argument's sake about why NertZ is better than M0nesy, right? But I also then, obviously, while we were doing this argument, I was looking up lots of numbers. So I do actually have numbers to go by this. I'm going to go even a little bit further than Cole and strongly agree. And I'll give reasons why. So first of all, I come from a finance background, so I still stick in. Look at the impact these two signings have had on their rosters. One, however, is a 10th of the price of the other, right? There's obviously the other side of the caveat being that M0nesy is 5 years younger. I'm pretty sure it's 5 years younger. I might be a little bit. Oh no, 6 years. Isn't that 24? So 6 years younger, and obviously M0nesy's 18. So as a big caveat, built for the future a little bit more. M0nesy, of course, but M0nesy's been in this team in G2 for 1 year and 7 months now, right? And he's won 3 trophies in that time that he's been there. One being, of course, an MVP. Where NertZ has been in this team for 6 months and has won 1 trophy. So he's on the track essentially for the same amount of trophies within the same period of time. If he plays 1 year and 7 months, he's on track. He's getting a trophy. He's averaging a trophy every 6 months, which is the same what M0nesy's averaging, right? Already 10th of the price. Then you can add on top that when Ence signed NertZ, they were ranked 19th in the world. They're currently ranked, 4th they are, I think, in the current rankings at the moment. I'm pretty sure, like 4th or 3rd, something like that. So that is a massive increase. Obviously, all the points that you guys brought up about
First
this team.
in Valve rankings as well.
First in Valve rankings, which, as we all know, is going to be what's the only thing that matters. We don't give a fuck about HOTV or ESL or Blast. We don't give a shit about your rankings. Valve rankings, Beastie on top 20, baby. We love to see it. But somehow, NertZ sneaking in the top 8, motherfucker than that. Anyway, lot of work to be done on the Valve rankings. However, Ence are number 1 in the Valve rankings right now. And as we know, that's the only thing that's going to matter. That actually wasn't even what I mentioned, but I'm going to add that to the repertoire. I'm going to go back at him with that one. He's going to hate it. But yeah, I think basically for me, in my eyes, I think for the money they spent on him compared to the results they've got out of him in such a short amount of time, it's incredible. And also, you got to take the caveat. Obviously, we also like to talk about honeymoon phase, but I think there's the other side of thing where it takes time for players to slot into systems, and we are seeing now NertZ comfortable within that end system, playing the way he's meant to be playing, and allowing for the others on the team to play well as well. I was saying this to Paladin. I used to be quite a big Madden hater. I really didn't actually rate Madden very highly at all. back in the previous iteration of roster before NertZ was brought on, I always kind of thought he was a bit of a waste of space, to be perfectly honest, and not doing his roles effectively. And I thought there's people who could do it more effectively. Now my opinion is completely flipped on him. In that sense, I think he's very good at what he does in terms of his roles as well. Very good. D-Hero in terms of role player as well is improved tenfold in my eyes. I think he's become, all the analysts like to say the same buzzwords about how smart he is and how good he is in certain positions and whatever, but they're fucking spot on. He's so good in his roles. Obviously, it can leave him limited in other situations, but I think what he's done to this team is improved them from going from just a team that were kind of within tier 1, but it was a loose term, to now being a cemented team. That now when we have conversations, we were talking in our opening point about who's the number 1 team in the world and who, if we went into tournaments, who would we expect to finish at least top 2, and so within that rightful conversation alongside teams like G2, like Vitality, and like Heroic. And that, if you said a year ago today or 6 months ago, if you said that, oh yeah, by the way, Ence are going to be consistently in the conversations of G2, Heroic, and Vitality as the teams that are going to be favorites going into tournaments, that is a monstrous shift in the kind of the mentality. So I think the biggest point still comes back to what they paid for him compared to the results they've got. They got 1 trophy in 6 months, which is very good. They've been in finals basically in every single event for the last 4 or 5 essentially. And obviously with Gamers 8 finals still not concluded yet, potentially could even be another trophy under their belt there. In an S tier tournament, right? And if that does happen, then he's already superseded the kind of trophies per month of M0nesy. So a lot of this comes from me just chatting shit to annoy my friend, but on the same sense, a lot of it does come down to, I do think NertZ has made a massive shift towards Ence, and I think if rumors are true that they got him for 60k, if that's what I read in a variety of kind of online space, so you got to take it with a grain of salt. But knowing, him coming from Endpoint, I can't imagine it being massively too expensive to pick him up. It again, an incredible bit of shrewd business from Ence. Shows how really good they are in terms of the scouting department, and how good they are in terms of seeing what players would slot in towards this wonderful kind of brain of Snappy. So for me, I think at the moment, the money they've paid for M0nesy hasn't paid off in terms of results, but I think it has in terms of brand value. I think what they've got for the future out of him is incredible. He most likely goes into CS2 with every bit of hopes on him being the best player to ever touch that game, right? If we're looking longevity. However, I think right now, I think that the signing of NertZ is better.
I do love the arguing for argument's sake thing. It reminds me of there's a quote that's
so
like,
often, dude.
it's a quote that's like, I like playing devil's advocate because it's not my opinion, it's the devil's, and everyone knows the devils are wrong, and so it's fine. It's all good.
That was my points coming in towards this episode. I had a couple stocked up as well, and it was points that were basically, I'm just going to argue for argument's sake, but this one was an argument for argument's sake that I ended up convincing myself. I actually disagreed originally, but I was playing devil's advocate to annoy my friend. However, I then,
you talked yourself into it.
Yeah, I talked myself into it. So this is now where I stand. I think currently better bang for your buck.
Here's the thing, though. Here's the thing. There's two angles you can always approach arguments through. You can go logical. You can go numbers. I'm a bit more of an emotional guy sometimes. So I'm going to hit you with the emotional gut punch, right? If M0nesy wasn't on G2, we might still have to watch Nico AWP. Oh, God, because I don't know what they'd have done. I don't know who else they were going to get. I don't know if they were just going to decide, we don't need an AWPer. We'll just stick with like Amanek or someone. And listen, no one wants to watch that. No one wants to watch that. Whereas now Nico has actually won some tournaments, actually starting to get to play really well and do well.
Okay,
you don't think that they could have found an AWPer that could replace Amanek a little bit better in this? With,
I don't know if Dexter, they would have. We can't know these things.
They would have found an AWPer. If they're willing to spend 600k
for 600k,
a literal child, then I'm sure they would have found an AWPer. I raise you one, however. If it wasn't for NertZ coming in, we'd have to watch Valde play Hero Rifle, and that makes me feel sick to my stomach. So,
and lose to Complexity and Kato.
Pick your poison here, brother. Like, you either got Nico, AWPing, most of the time, but obviously still picks up the rifle, or we got having to watch Valda and Ence play together.
I don't care as much about Valda as I do about Nico, personally. I'm not gonna lie. Sorry, Valda. Sorry.
Fair enough.
You got like free agents like Dexter, like Zorte. I mean, I think there was a world where they could have gotten a couple of really good free agents for probably much cheaper. In all
Wonderful
honesty,
as well was up there, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But
And
I think who else they
I
could've got.
clearly G2 are okay with
They've got buying power as well. They could
shady
poach,
business
man.
practices like CS:GO role. They would definitely have had been open to buying Russians. Like I
Yeah.
don't think that would have been a big deal for them.
They've
I
got
do
buying
think
power, man. They
that
could have poached other players from other teams. I mean, like,
Oh, that's also a
honestly,
possibility. Yeah.
with how bad their finances are right now, there's 100% a world in which they could have taken Brokey from FaZe. I stand by that.
potentially, yeah.
FaZe
I
are in
do
the
think
mud right
the
now, money wise.
the main point I really can make is that I really do think staying as like the biggest brand in esports or in a game, I really do think is huge right
Yeah.
now. Like if you look at how sports teams have made all their money, it's literally like, oh, in the 20 years I owned this team, it's now worth like hundreds of millions more. And so signing m0nesy, even though I get the so far bit, you can say that you can't really talk about his potential as a player as much. I can talk about the fact that it keeps them on top and it keeps them very much one of, if not the most like well-established, respected brands in esports. And so if CS:GO blows up in the future, which, or well, CS2 now, if CS blows up in the future, I think there's a very good chance when you have m0nesy that you are going to be able to reap the rewards of that. So really, guys, it all just comes down to if you believe in esports or not. And if you agree you don't believe in esports and you don't believe that they'll make loads of money from this game getting massive in the future, all right? Did you ever think about that?
You're
Just think
bringing
about
in the
let me
cultural
also-
impact of m0nesy.
Yeah, like how will this affect LeBron's legacy? Is what we come down to. But no, don't get me wrong. I still think m0nesy is a better player and will always be a better player. But I think, again, it comes down to like the impact on the other side as well. Is we could just you kind of jogged the memory of it. I was also saying that G2 are a side that were happy to sign anyone, but who else in terms of a top level rifler fits into Ence's budget? They're all the little caveats that come with a signing for Ence. It's much harder for them to find a very top tier rifler than it is for G2 to find a top tier AWPer. Is where I was coming from. Is another thing, and I think that's the other thing for me is that I can't really think of any tier 2 riflers right now that are incredibly cheap or don't have huge buyouts that they could have picked up at the same kind of cost or whatever they did for NertZ compared to G2 who are willing to buy anyone for any price.
Yeah, I kind of gave up on that side of the argument a while ago. I'm pulling Maui Snake-esque points out of my arse now.
No, I love it. I love
Try
it.
it.